Welcome back to Amerisogyny. I'm your host, Hannah Blue. You're listening to episode 66. Good guys and girls finish last. Storm Debbie is in full force in North Carolina. I'm sure you can hear it outside. I refuse to call it a girl. The only good Debbie in my life, the little Debbie Christmas cakes when I was a kid. And I say when I was a kid because they don't taste the same. But then again, what does? Yep, this storm has been roaring since last night. But guess what? It's stopping nothing because we have a show to do. The stories I'm bringing you today are about good people who received some harsh realities they didn't deserve. The first story we're going to talk about is one that happened right here in North Carolina. North Carolina, you are the number one state in this country that listens to me. And I think a lot of you listen because you want to hear news about North Carolina. Well, here you go. This is a story about a man who dedicated his time to helping people with mental health issues. An exceptional mental health advocate who was shot down like a rabid dog by a North Carolina police officer. And he wasn't alone. That's right. An entire swarm of officers, like nasty angry bees, came for one man. And after Sergeant Adam Roberts shot him to death, Officer Randall Down told Roberts, "We got him. Good guys always win." How sick and disgusting is that? Let's get into it. For 20 years, attorney Dennis Alexander Bodden helped people in New York City who suffered from mental health issues. Mr. Bodden was a graduate of Rutgers University. He had a degree in biochemistry, and he graduated from Cardozo School of Law. A brilliant man indeed. According to his mother, Cleopatra Bodden, he suffered from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Mr. Bodden's mental health started to decline, so he relocated from New York City to his hometown in Pineville. Mr. Bodden went from being a mental health advocate who selflessly helped people to needing help himself. And here's what's tragic. When he needed help, there was no one to help him. No one. Mr. Bodden was killed on May 14th after he left a food giant supermarket in Pineville without paying for produce and a bottle of wine. According to the store's management, Bodden would often shoplift, and he'd pick up items and walk out of the store without paying for them. Well, someone called the cops. And here's what happened when he was murdered by Sergeant Adam Roberts. As Roberts confronted him, he continued to walk away, and Roberts ordered him to the ground. Now, Bodden was wearing headphones, so maybe he didn't hear the cop, but he yelled when Roberts tried to grab him from behind. Now, according to the body cam footage, no physical contact was witnessed during the exchange. Bodden appeared to be stepping out into traffic when the cop pulled him back. Now, if someone is going to walk out in front of cars without looking both ways, that's a clear sign that something is wrong. Did something click in Roberts' mind? Not in Roberts' mind, because he wrestled him to the ground. And keep in mind, this is in the middle of a busy street, you guys. He claims Bodden allegedly bit him. After that, he tasered Bodden, but Bodden stood up and continued walking. And it seems he was trying to get home. He was walking in the direction of an apartment complex where he lived. And that's when a group of officers arrived on the scene to help detain Bodden. That's right, a group for one man. That's what some of them do. And apparently, this sent Mr. Bodden into a panic. Who wouldn't be? When he turned and seemed to charge Roberts, he fired 3 times, striking him in the stomach. And even after this, Mr. Bodden continued walking from the parking lot, where he fell into a grassy area face forward. As he gasped for his final breaths, he was handcuffed. Well, surprise, surprise, and I'm being sarcastic, the Mecklenburg County District Attorney Spencer Merriweather chose not to charge Roberts. And guess what? A judge agreed. Let me read you an excerpt. Based upon the information provided to my office, Dennis Bodden was a graduate of Rutgers University with a degree in biochemistry and a graduate of the Cardozo School of Law. Tragically, Mr. Bodden's mental health reportedly began to deteriorate during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that condition may very well have contributed to the events that ultimately led to his death. While the circumstances surrounding his death are especially jarring, there is no likelihood the 12 jurors would unanimously agree that the actions of Sergeant Roberts in firing his gun constituted a violation of criminal law. Therefore, I concur with your agency's decision not to seek criminal charges against Sergeant Adam Roberts. While the appropriateness of Sergeant Roberts' tactics may be ripe for other authorities to evaluate, such questions exceed the purview of the district attorney as a matter of criminal law and are beyond the scope of this consultation. The letter says Mr. Bodden was instructed to get on the ground and that Sergeant Roberts informed dispatch that he already tried to push off on him. So apparently they believe the cop. However, the statement about his tactics may be ripe for other authorities to evaluate? Doesn't that mean something is sketchy? In my opinion, it does. Now, police claim they didn't know that Biden suffered from mental health issues, but his mother said, "Not today, Satan." She said, if you tell someone to stop and they're not reacting, you should know that there is something else going on, that that person is not stable, and they didn't take that into consideration. And I agree with her. All of the signs were there. The police didn't look for them, nor did they care. I've said this before on this show, and I'm going to say it again. This is why many parents do not call the police. And I'm talking about parents who have children who suffer from mental health issues. I'm one of them. I have a friend who was born and raised right here in North Carolina. Her son is autistic. And let me tell you something. My friend and I, we're as different can be. She's white. I'm black. She's a tough, biker-like chick with tattoos covering her. I have no tattoos at all. But we share a common factor. Both of our children were diagnosed with autism. And at any time, both of our children, when having a mental health crisis in the street, could be harmed by police. I'm not just talking to black mothers and white mothers. I'm talking to Mexican mothers. I'm talking to Puerto Rican mothers. I'm talking to Asian mothers. I'm talking to Native American mothers. I'm talking to any mother out there listening that has a child with a mental health issue. I am talking to mothers in Colombia, South Korea, Argentina, the Philippines. Yes, I'm talking to you. This is a fear that we share, that our kids are going to be hurt if they have a mental health crisis. Because there are cops like Sergeant Roberts who do not give a damn if people have mental health crises. To us, these are our children. But to people like Roberts, they are no more than dogs who need to be put out of their misery. And that is just that. Mr. Bodden was a pillar of his community. From 2015 to 2019, he worked for the Mental Hygiene Legal Service in New York, and he advocated and litigated on behalf of individuals with disabilities. This man did not deserve to be shot down in the streets of Pineville, and I think it is reprehensible that this district attorney and this judge agreed not to hold Sergeant Roberts accountable. It is absolutely disrespectful not only to Mr. Bodden's legacy, but to his sanctity of life. Guess what? He's already shot someone before, and make no mistake, he's going to do it again. And this sends a message that police force has a license to kill instead of doing what they are supposed to do, and that is to protect and serve the citizens of Pineville, North Carolina. I'm not against cops. I'm against bad cops. I am against those who take lives recklessly with no justification. There was no reason to kill Mr. Bodden. And this is also why mental health services need to be placed in the communities. The responsibility of assisting people with mental health issues should not be placed in the hands of cops. And I said what I said. Many of these police forces do not have the required training, and more than a few of them have too many ignorant cops who are uneducated in psychology. Make it a requirement. And if they have a history of prior shootings, they should be investigated immediately, pulled off of the force without pay. Mr. Biden had a master's in social work. You have to have a passion for helping people to get into that line of work. He did it because he wanted to help people. And it's a crying shame, during his final moments, he had no one to help him. That absolutely breaks my heart. For those of you who listen to me, if you have people who struggle with mental health, we have a duty and a responsibility not just to advocate for them, but for others. My heart is with his mother. Now let's get ready for our next stop, the UK. 33-year-old Carrie Ann Knight was a soldier in the British Army, and she claims she endured over a decade of racism and misogynistic abuse. And for what? In 2012, while she was still in training, she appeared on a national recruitment poster, and the slogan was, "Your Army needs you and your self-belief." Now, she hoped her image would change perceptions for other young black women about the British Army. Her fellow soldiers didn't like that she was featured on the poster, not one bit. And for 12 years of her service, they made her pay for it. Now, looking back on it, Knight said she thought they chose her for the poster because of her accomplishments during training. But she said, "I didn't know it was because I was going to be the only black woman in that regiment. I didn't know what I was in for." She was only 20 years old and says there was a lot of sexism. However, when you put race into play, as well for me, it just felt like it was multiplied by 10. Knight was an instructor at the Army Foundation College in Harrogate. Her job was to train new recruits. Some were as young as 16 and 17. According to Knight, her fellow soldiers took delight in shouting, "Watermelon," anytime she walked into the room. And if you are listening to me and you don't know the connotation behind watermelon, watermelon is rooted in ethnic notions. Watermelon is essentially a stereotype that all black people love watermelon and that we're lazy. And that stereotype started right here in the South in the USA. Let me explain further. After the emancipation of slaves, watermelons were used as economic self-sufficiency in the late 1860s. After the Civil War, former slaves grew watermelon on their own land as a cash crop to sell. For them, the watermelons were symbols of liberation and self-sufficiency. But this made Southern white people mad because they lost the war and they lost control over slavery. So they started creating all of these racist cartoons with the most hideous depictions of black people eating watermelon. And they used this to describe them as childish and unclean. Look it up. In 1909, there was a postcard of a little black girl called a pickaninny. Research that, what a pickaninny is. And the postcard said, "Eyes so happy." It's a way to demean us. Now, I'll tell you, I don't like watermelon and I don't eat it. And I don't buy my niece or my nephews any merchandise that has watermelon depicted on it. The first published character of black people seeming to enjoy watermelon in an exaggerated state was published in Frank Leslie's illustrated newspaper in 1869. And people who were pro-slavery used it to depict black people as simple-minded people who were happy when provided with watermelon and a little rest during slavery. And let me tell you, there are a lot of people right here in this country who still believe that black people are stupid to this day, even though some of us are the hardest working people in this country, we are still depicted as lazy and ignorant. And it is not true. From Sojourner Truth to Madam C.J. Walker to First Lady Michelle Obama to Vice President Kamala Harris and Olympic champ Simone Biles, we have never been stupid, ignorant, or lazy. We are the epitome of excellence. And thank you. But yeah, Knight said the soldiers got a kick out of that. They would laugh every time someone shouted it. Knight said, I had to serve along people that claimed to support the KKK, Britain First, and or the English Defense League. She said the male soldiers would call her a black bitch, but say, I'd still shag you though. And they will. Knight went on to say she overheard colleagues discussing getting lynched and being tarred and feathered. One mentioned putting her in a hot box, and this was in reference to a torture scene from Django Unchained, where a black female slave was locked in a wooden coffin. Django Unchained was directed by Quentin Tarantino, and she said the male soldiers enjoyed playing this over and over. She also said, one evening, I returned to my room to see someone had drawn images of huge black penises all over the wardrobes in my room. Now, did she fight back? Of course she did. She submitted complaints with evidence, screenshots, and video recording. And what did the British Army do for her? They removed her from her role in training junior soldiers, citing they were concerned about her mental or emotional state. Knight said, I think when it got to that stage, that's when I just realized that the Army is institutionally racist, and they would go above and beyond in order to discredit me as an individual, in order to protect the Army image, to portray that racism doesn't exist, even though it was there in black and white. Well, she took action in December of 2022, and as a result, she received a settlement and a public apology. But get this, as a part of the settlement, the Ministry of Defense did not have to admit liability. Disgusting. And so dishonorable of them. Emma Norton was Knight's solicitor from the Center for Military Justice, and she said, for the Army, it was not the racists that needed to be dealt with, it was Carrie Ann, because she'd had the audacity to complain about racism and misogyny. What's the name of the show, guys? Amerisogyny. It is all dreadfully familiar, and it shows again that in the British Army, it is worse to accuse someone of racism than it is to be racist. And yeah, racism and or misogyny exists in every military unit all around the world. Carrie Ann Knight, you're a bad girl, meaning you're awesome. And I'm glad you got your settlement. And that's how you do it, ladies. Fight for your rights and your money. On to our last stop, social media. Let's talk about Ozempic, the miracle drug that's making everybody skinny. Here's what I don't think is being talked about enough. Side effects. Macy Gray says she went to the hospital over Ozempic and its side effects. Let's get into it. Macy Gray is 56 and she appeared on MTV's The Surreal Life Villa of Secrets. And it was there that she began complaining about the effects of Ozempic. On an episode that appeared on July 23rd, she said, "Oh boy, my stomach hurts. I took Ozempic. I can't go to the bathroom and I was up all night." And Gray's condition worsened. She said she had shortness of breath. According to Gray, "This sucks because I'm here all the way in Colombia and I really just want to give it my all. But I feel just awful, and I just want it to go away. This is not going well. I can't even walk very much without losing my breath." Now, off camera, a medic on the set reminded Gray that she was taking a medication that affects her pancreas and suggested she go to the hospital. After she went to the hospital, Chet Hanks, who is the son of actor Tom Hanks, said, "She hasn't been eating." And X Factor star Ally Brooks said, "I know why. It's the shot. That's what happens. It literally happened to like my friends." Now, thank God, Macy Gray recovered, but many do not. Let's get into the side effects of good old Ozempic. Stomach paralysis, muscle spasms, vomiting, malnutrition, dehydration, and a whole lot more. The most horrific one, gastroparesis. And if you don't know what that is, let me tell you, your stomach muscles are supposed to help with digestion. But Ozempic slows the levels down. As a result, the food that should be leaving your body gets stuck inside your gut. And this can cause bloating, vomiting, pain, nausea, and malnutrition. Novo Nordisk is the parent company of Ozempic, and they said delayed gastric emptying is a noted side effect on the labeling, but most patients only experience minor slowed stomach. It's been used to treat type 2 diabetes for more than 15 years and to treat obesity for 8 years. Let me tell you, Novo Nordisk, along with Eli Lilly, do not give a damn how many people suffer on this medication. Their goal is to make money, and they've made plenty of it. In 2023 alone, Novo Nordisk, who makes Ozempic and Wegovy, made $8.4 billion for their third quarter. And Eli Lilly, who makes Mounjaro, made $9.5 billion in their third quarter. So yeah, you think they care? Think again. Here's what's even more sickening. Kimberly Carew tried to get on social media and warn people about the effects of Ozempic, and her commenters dragged her from pillar to post. But that isn't even the scariest part. She said after she experienced painful side effects after starting Ozempic, none of her doctors knew what was causing her pain, and they encouraged her to continue using Ozempic. It's so easy for Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk to make money because we have demonized being fat. It is more popular to be a serial killer than to be fat, okay? The infamous monster Richard Ramirez had fans. So did Ted Bundy. But nobody claps for fat people. Carew said, "It was horrific. It was a horrible experience that none of my doctors seemed to understand or really believe. It was a shock for them. Like, no, this is supposed to be a miracle drug. What are you talking about?" Carew went to the ER for dehydration, pneumonia, and extensive signs of malnutrition. When the doctors ran tests, they found her stomach wasn't just hurting, it was paralyzed. And guess what, people? It's not curable. The symptoms can only be managed. And providers believe one of the biggest factors of the disease is taking a toll on patients' mental health. Well, Carew got on TikTok to raise awareness and find people who were suffering like her. She got more than what she bargained for. After her first video received over 600,000 views, people who had used Ozempic and were in favor of it accused her of lying about her diagnosis, spreading misinformation, and being dramatic. And that's what I hate about TikTok. When you get on there and tell the truth, if people don't want to hear it, they say one word: misinformation. When in reality, the app in itself is one big bundle of misinformation. But someone telling the truth about their experiences with Ozempic is not. It's the truth. Carew said she almost took the video down because she was so overwhelmed with negative comments. People blamed her for having negative side effects instead of the drug. How crazy is that? And she's telling the truth. I did a video about Ozempic and they did the same thing to me. TikTok gave pro-Ozempic people a platform, and accounts with large followings told people to ignore the pushback against Ozempic, calling them lies and scare tactics. In a previous episode, I told you there are a lot of people on TikTok who do not give a damn about the health and safety of others. They're on there for views and notoriety. Hundreds of people accused Carew of fear-mongering and told her she should have known better. Now, allegedly, no major Ozempic influencers have criticized Carew or her content, but the dragging she received from people in her comments was more than enough. Here's the truth. A large amount of people who took Ozempic have been diagnosed with gastroparesis, that is paralysis of the stomach. And it's been enough that the American Society of Anesthesiologists encourage people who take these drugs to stop taking them at least a week before they have elective surgery because of the risk they could regurgitate food while under anesthesia, food that is supposed to be digested. Carew says, now it seems to be like coming to light, and people are coming back that saw my video and are like, hey, did you see this in the news? And she said, I'm like, yeah, that's what I said almost a year ago. I tried to say something about it and no one listened. Now that more people believe her, Carew says she feels vindicated. She says she's committed to continue posting about the experience because of the wealth of misinformation on TikTok. What's imperative to note? Carew has a Master of Science in Psychology and Counseling. Can you imagine? This woman is educated, and she had hundreds and hundreds of people dragging her for telling the truth. That's what TikTok is. Well, I'm not here to tell you what or what not to take, because people are going to do what they're going to do. What I'm going to encourage you to do is what I've always encouraged you to do. Advocate. Stand in the gap for justice and protection. As for me, I will weightlift until I die. But the one thing I will never do is take Ozempic, Wegovy, or anything else for weight loss. Well, people, I have brought you stories of good people who didn't get a fair shake. As I've been speaking, Storm Debbie has been relentless, and so have I. I've amplified the voices in these stories to encourage you to start or to continue advocating for people who cannot advocate for themselves. It's one thing to suffer, but if you're not using your struggle to advocate for others, then what's the point of telling your story? And with that, I'm out of time. If you learned anything in this episode, feel free to follow me. By now you know where. Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Samsung, YouTube Music, iHeartRadio, and more. The weekend is here, you guys, so I want you to be easy. I will be back with more stories. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great weekend. And as always, God bless.